In the spring of 1949, Pete Seeger and his wife Toshi began building a log cabin on 17 acres of land by the banks of the Hudson River outside the town of Beacon, New York. They lived in a tent and cooked over an open fire, chopped and dressed logs, dug up stones and mixed mortar for a chimney, and by fall, with the help of Toshi's brother and the stream of friends who dropped by to lend a hand, they had 4 walls and a roof, with simple windows and doors. It wasn't much fixed up, Seeger recalled, but we'd built a house. They built a place in the local community the same way. When their children began school, Toshi got involved and was shortly a leader of the PTA. When more space was needed for the school grounds, a group of fathers volunteered to clear land, and Pete went down and put in his hours with the others. He enjoyed manual labor, was happy to get his hands dirty and to be part of a crew. Many years later, I attended a weekend retreat for leftist singers and songwriters not far from Beacon. As at all such gatherings, there were plenty of egos on display, people showing off their musical skills, their latest compositions, their superior experience, and command of radical orthodoxies. Pete, by then a hallowed icon in his 60s, showed up for lunch on the second day and was asked to say a few words. His entire speech, as I recall it, was, "This is a wonderful event, and I wish I could spend the whole weekend with you, but unfortunately I can only be here for a couple of hours. So if anyone wants to talk with me, come on back to the kitchen and we can talk while we do the dishes." Seeger was a hard man to know, and sometimes a hard man to like, but he was an easy man to admire, and he backed up his words and beliefs with his actions. Some people might think it was hokey to build that house with his own hands. The Harvard boy homesteading on a patch of prairie an hour and a half north of Manhattan. It went along with dragging a log on stage and chopping it with an axe to accompany a Texas work song. My older brother saw him do that in the late 1950s and remembered it ever after as corny bullshit. But corny or not, the house got built, and Pete and Toshi lived in it for the next 60 years. Adding a comfortable barn and guest quarters, skating on the nearby pond in the winter, tapping the maple trees for syrup. It was part of his myth and fitted his image. But it was a real house, and when he came home from the road he sat in front of the fireplace built with stones from their land, and friends dropped by to play music, and he answered all the letters people wrote him, signing each with a little drawing of a banjo, and always seemed to find time for everybody, or at least to try very hard. Pete built the folk revival of the 1960s in much the same way, log by log and stone by stone. He had help, but in a lot of ways it was also a family affair. It was not his the way the house was. He always pushed other people forward and tried to act like part of the crew, and although he encouraged every musician who came along, he was often unhappy with how the scene grew and changed, and eventually it got away from him. Even when he was clearly a central figure, hosting concerts and planning the Newport Folk Festivals, he was more often described as a model or inspiration than as an organizer or manager, and increasingly in later years he was described as a saint, not always as a compliment. He was a warm, welcoming presence on stage, but off it he could seem distant and somewhat cold, and his unrelenting efforts to always do the right thing could be tiresome or off-putting. And sometimes the right thing didn't turn out to be so right. Whether it was opposing U.S. entry into World War II during the period of the Stalin-Hitler Pact, or objecting to Bob Dylan's electric set at Newport in 1965, he tried to correct his mistakes, joining the Army in 1942, recording with electric instruments in 1967, expressing his anguish over the Soviet dictatorship. But they, too, have become part of his legend. In retrospect, that legend often overshadowed his work, and it is easy to forget what the work was. This is particularly true because Seeger was first and foremost a live performer, and only a shadow of his art survives on recordings. That was fine with him. He always felt the recordings were just another way of getting songs and music out into the world. If you complimented him, he would suggest you listen to the people who inspired him, and a lot of us did, and discovered Woody Guthrie, Leadbelly, Uncle Dave Macon.